The afternoon sun shone over the city with its stone buildings. Darkfeather asked why he should put away his heavy sniper rifle. Ling Si replied that it attracted too much attention. Darkfeather, the main character, Tillies and Ruko are walking down the street. Ruko said with a grin that just looking at his stupid sniper rifle was enough for anyone with vision to know at a glance that they were the hotly debated team that had completed the dungeon in 16 minutes. Darkfeather corrected him by saying that his rifle is called Shadow Killer. Ling Si said he has a habit of hiding his information, and each of them in the team should hide their information in their next operations from now on. He told them to trust him because revealing their information would only cause endless problems. He also suggested that they try to draw as little attention to themselves as possible when they are outside. He added, better safe than sorry. Tilly said she was fine with it, but according to the protagonist's promises, she joined because his suggestions sounded interesting and challenging. She said that if she got bored, she could leave whenever she wanted. The main character told her that if she gets bored, she is free to do as she wants. He thought that as long as there was a challenge, Tilly's would stay with them, but he didn't expect Darkfeather to just choose to stay with them. He recalled how Darkfeather had told him that he was a solo player and wasn't joining teams on a permanent basis. However, to repay Shadow Killer, he would be joining them for a while. He warned that if he suddenly leaves the team one day, do not be too surprised, because he has his own plans. Ling Si thought that, in any case, their team at the moment matches what he was hoping for, so this is a great start. Ruko told the main character that there are many teams here that are already fully equipped. He replied that it went without saying because it was the road leading to the team leaderboard registration lobby. He said that teams without the appropriate ability level will not apply for permission to participate in the team leaderboard. Tilly said that, in addition, all the teams they can see here came from guilds or workshops of considered standing. She said that's why team leaderboard is also called signboard. She explained that being ranked on the leaderboard is a direct way to show the strength of your guild or workshop. Glancing to the side, she said that the higher a place was, the stronger their guild or workshop was, and it became an important way to advertise. Ruko rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said that then it was no wonder that when he looked at this leaderboard last time, the teams in the top 10 were basically all from the 5 major guilds. He said that the competition for such free advertising is quite severe. Tilly's concluded that Ling Si's goal of getting into the top 10 in team leaderboard is quite difficult because it will have to compete with 5 major guilds. The main character calmly told her not to worry. Looking ahead, he said that he wouldn't have any problems with them instead. In front of them was a magnificent huge building entrance, above which a dialogue box says, "Welcome to the lobby to register for team leaderboard." The main character called them to go inside. Ruko called out to him. He asked if he had come up with a name for their team. The main character paused for a moment. He calmly replied that he hadn't thought about it and suggested naming it randomly because it didn't matter. Ruko exclaimed that this wouldn't do. Grinning, he held up his index finger and said that he didn't know that, as the saying goes, picking a good name will make you a winner for life. He exclaimed that they should give their team a grand name. Ruko said he thought about it all the time. He said that their team is constantly hiding their information, and they are as mysterious as shadows, while others only know that they exist and don't know exactly who they are or what they are. Ling Si glanced at him. Ruko suggested naming their team Shadows. He asked if they liked it. The main character thought of this title in surprise. Someone said it sounded a little silly. Ruko asked in frustration if they didn't like it. Ling Si smiled. He suggested naming the team Shadow. Ruko looked at the main character in surprise. Ling Si said that this name is simple, clean, and also retains the meaning that Ruko wanted to express. Entering the building, the main character suggests calling their team Shadow. Ruko jumped up and down happily. Darkfeather and Tilly's calmly watched the main character go. After applying for permission to join Team Leaderboard, the 4 of them started setting new records in dungeons that would benefit them. The main character's group fights a huge stone monster in Dungeon Heart of Dust, Insanity difficulty. Even when they couldn't speed through some of the crazy difficulty dungeons due to the restrictions on their team composition, they also tried their best to speed through these special difficulty dungeons and set new records. The main character's team crosses a rope bridge over a precipice while Ling Si fights monsters chasing them in Dungeon Secret Treasure of the Solitary Cliff, a special difficulty. Completing the dungeons themselves wasn't difficult, and what they paid the most attention to was completing them at the best possible speed to save time. While leaving themselves plenty of space to follow up, they were also making calculations. Since the team leaderboard is updated once a week, they only have 4 chances to get into the top 10. In theory, they should make sure to squeeze into the top 10 at least once. Over time, Shadow started setting a lot of new records. Since they had made their detailed information private, the players only knew that there was a team called Shadow that was setting new records one by one at an alarming rate. Even though they had yet to make it to the top 10, it was an undeniable fact that they had left their mark in the form of top records on one dungeon after another. The main character thought that something he never expected had happened, and this type of special fame became something that people with bad intentions started fighting among themselves for. The guy with the animal ears grinned viciously. Tilly's asked about what he says, that there are people who pretend to be them. Ruko replied that he also heard about it from Tiana from their guild. Placing his hands on his waist, he frowned and asked if she knew how famous they, Shadow, were at the moment. He said that so many imposters appeared because they were so famous. Ruko added accusingly that they were a bunch of guys with nothing to do. While jumping down from the tree, Ling Si told him that he was paying attention to the wrong things, and all the fuss going on in the world was for the sake of benefit and profit. Darkfeather said that they are most likely doing this in order to claim the records they have set for themselves. The main character said that an anonymous popular team has considerable commercial value, and regardless of what collaborations are made, as soon as these imposters make a deal with their victims, they will be able to appropriate all sorts of privileges. Looking at the game interface not far from the disappearing monster, he said that it was the last one. The main character offered to distribute the rewards for passing and prepare for the next dungeon. The dialogue box says, "The annoying mountain ape completed. Congratulations on setting the insanity difficulty's new record. 24 minutes 35 seconds. Dungeon lobby." Ruko excitedly shouted about them going to the next dungeon. Tilly said that the next dungeon would be much easier and suggested that we go straight there. Ling Si, standing next to the huge crystal, said to wait and hand in the dungeon quest first. Noticing the cry of people running, Ling Si and Ruko turned around. A few people appeared next to them, looking like the main character's team, but worse. Ruko said in surprise that they are slightly similar to them, and their team composition is identical to that of their team. The main character frowned, and the person said that he didn't expect that right after they chased away a bunch of imposters, another one would appear. Ruko asked in surprise about it being another team with an identical team lineup. In front of them was a thief who looked like Ling Si, a battle mage wearing the same clothes as Tilly's, a sniper archer with a sniper rifle on his back, and a warrior with the same shield as Ruko. The shield warrior said that today the real Shadow would teach them, the imposters, a lesson. In front of the protagonist's team was a team of imposters, a beastman with white hair who looked like Ling Si, a guy with gray hair wearing glasses wearing red clothes like Tilly's, a plump guy with a rifle on his back, and a big guy with thick eyebrows with a shield like Ruko. The white-haired guy told them that right before they came, they chased away another team that pretended to be them, Shadow. He said he knew they were famous, but it was too much to pretend to be. Ling Si looked at them with a serious face. A person in the crowd asked if it was just another bunch of imposter Shadow team that had just arrived. He said they had the same equipment. Another person said that Shadow has been noticeably prominent lately, and because they've been hiding their information all along, many people have started pretending to be them. The white-haired guy was looking at Team Ling Si with an evil grin. A person in the crowd said that recently, this team, whose leader is a beastman thief, suddenly appeared and claimed that they were the real Shadow and even started attacking many imposters. Another person exclaimed that he had seen all the fights of the thief beastman team, and whenever they saw someone who said they were Shadow, they would just attack them. He said that now many people have recognized them as the real Shadow. The white-haired guy said that judging by their specialties and equipment, there was nothing else to discuss here. He shouted that they were imposters. The Ling Si team looked back at them calmly. The guy, nervous, asked them that, judging by how pale they were, they must be very scared of being exposed. He thought that the four of them were holding their faces well, and they were happy. He wondered if they really thought they were real. He thought that they should also practice their facial expressions when they got back. Ling Si exhaled. Turning around, he called for his team to leave, because they didn't need to waste their time on this small matter. A guy with white hair pointed at the main character and shouted at him. Tilly's, with an exasperated grin, said it was the first time she had ever seen someone pretending to be her. Darkfeather was shaking beside her. Tilly's glanced at him. Thinking of the smug grin of the fat guy pretending to be Darkfeather, Darkfeather furiously asked why such a pig was pretending to be him. A gun appeared in his hand. The protagonist awkwardly called out to them and told them that there was no need for them to attract unnecessary attention. The guy with the white hair asked what they were whispering about. He asked them that not only did they not agree to leave quietly, but they were also provoking them. The guy thought that since they were doing the same thing, then their acting skills should be better because they were people who specialized in beating up imposters. The main character asked them about what they say they are Shadow. The guy asked if he was blind, if there was any need to ask, and if there was anyone here who didn't know them. He said he would beat them up, the imposters. Ling Si asked, if so, how was he going to defeat them, the fakes? The guy replied that the rules are the same as usual, 1 against 1 between two teams. He said that if they were real Shadow, they must have some skills. He said that they had never been defeated by a fake team like them before. Ling Si agreed with a smile. The guy with the white hair wondered why they were so cooperative. The guy with the blonde hair suggested that they start if they agreed. Standing in front of Ling Si, he said with a smirk that the strongest one would win and the winner of their duel would be the side with the most wins in 3 rounds. The guy asked who they would send to fight in the first round. Ruko volunteered first. The blonde-haired guy looked at Ruko in surprise. Ruko said that it should be a duel between the owners of the same specialty, and only so it will be interesting. The guy with the blonde hair said that then let it be a duel between the same specialties. Drawing a stick on the ground, he said that the rules were simple, and they could only fight inside this circle and the winner would be decided in 5 minutes. He said that if he was pushed out of the circle, it would be considered a defeat. The guy asked if they were happy with it. Ruko replied that it wasn't a problem and he was going after it. Ling Si said that he wouldn't demand anything, and all he had to do was beat up this guy. Dark Feather told him to kill him. Ruko agreed and said that he would transform and flatten it. The main character said that he was forbidden to transform. He thought that Ruko's dueling skills were quite serious, and if he transformed, then there was no question of any competition, because his appearance after the transformation attracted too much attention. Ruko said in frustration that it wasn't interesting. The guy with the shield shouted to him that the match was starting. The dark-haired guy started announcing the match by raising his hand in the air. On the head of a guy with blonde hair, you can see that he has level 12. With a smirk, he asked Ruko, even though it's a duel, to let him give him some advice. The dark-haired guy pointed his hand forward and announced the start of the duel. Above Ruko's head, you can see that he is level 11. With a smirk, he told the opponent to attack him because he had become much stronger than he was before. The guy told him to wait. Ruko's eyes widened in surprise. The guy, blushing and smiling, said that they should first shake hands as a sign of respect for each other. He held out his hand. Ruko hesitantly agreed and said that this is the first time he sees a person who wants to shake hands before a duel. Grabbing Ruko's hand, the guy said that such an etiquette is still necessary. His face twisted into a wicked smile. Using shield bash, the guy swung the shield with an evil smile. He hit Ruko with his shield, and he flew backwards. Tilly scowled and swore at the boy. Ruko gritted his teeth as he landed and said that he cheated on him. He frowned, a vein bulging on his face, and said it was interesting. The guy told him that he lost because he was out of the circle. Ruko was surprised to see that he was standing outside the circle. He called out to him that he said he wanted to shake hands to wait for him not to expect a punch. Grinning maliciously, the guy said that, as expected from a fake, he doesn't use his head at all. He said that all means are good in war. The guy said he was the winner of the first dream, and rules are rules. He asked if he was going to deny his defeat in front of such a crowd of spectators. Ruko cursed. Ling Si watched with a frown. Tilly's, standing next to Ruko, told him to forget about it. She said she'd go next. A staff appeared in her hand, and she said to move on to the next match. She told their battle mage to come forward. Ruko, looking at her from behind, told her to avenge him and beat him beyond recognition. Dark Feather clicked his tongue and said that she was one step faster than him. A guy in the crowd asked why this battle mage girl looked so familiar. A guy with gray hair, adjusting his glasses, said he was coming. He said that he did not expect that his opponent would be a girl and promised that he would spare her. He raised his eyebrows. Tilly's asked for mercy while standing in front of him. Frowning, she told him to keep the word. A guy in the crowd exclaimed in surprise, asking about the fact that it was Tilly's from the arena. Another person replied that he also thought he was imagining it at first, but it was really Tilly's. The girl said she thought she would never join a team. The guy replied that he had even heard rumors that she was a member of the big workshop, but he wasn't sure if that was true or not. He urged her to enjoy the show first and said that he had heard that she was fighting Shadow, a team that has been very popular lately. Ling Si thought that they still attracted a crowd in the end. He thought that this incident with the imposters was a good cover for their identities. The Tilly's staff was shrouded in yellow energy. The guy with the gray hair asked her why she was so angry. With a smirk, he told her not to be so serious. He offered to treat her to desserts at the new dessert shop on Commercial Street after all this. Tilly's frowned at him. The guy gritted his teeth in exasperation and wondered if she really considered herself real. He thought that he had already given her a chance to save himself from disgrace, but now he would beat her until she begged for mercy. His staff was shrouded in pink energy. They were facing each other, and the man announced the start of the duel. The guy told her not to blame him for holding back. Chuckling, he said that he didn't want to hit the woman either. Grinning, he told her to try not to be too surprised by his skills since he was a shadow member after all. Using the thorn lock, he called out to her to feel his passionate, spiked embrace. Thorny vines emerged from the ground. They headed towards Tilly's. She stood motionless as the vines surrounded her. The guy said that now she is surrounded by his spikes and will not be able to move. Tilly stood quietly among the surrounding vines. Frowning, she looked ahead. Ruko asked in surprise why she allowed herself to be enveloped and if she would be okay. Ling Si told him not to worry and asked if he thought he was the kind of person who would calmly allow himself to be beaten up. Grinning, he thought that, compared to the time when he fought Tilly's, she had become much stronger. He thought that instead of attacking the opponent head-on like before, he had learned to observe his opponent's attacks. He thought she was going to let this jerk be cocky for a few more seconds. The bespectacled guy grinned smugly. He shouted at her to just give up. A man in the crowd asked if the fight was over. Another person asked why it was so weak and if it was Tilly's. Tilly's was completely surrounded by vines. A person in the crowd said he was saying that Tilly's couldn't suddenly just join a team with other people and they just look alike. A man in the crowd shouted that smoke was coming from the top of the vines. Smoke drifted between the vines. A burst of yellow energy scattered the vines, tearing them apart. The bespectacled guy opened his mouth in surprise. A stream of yellow energy in the shape of a snake's mouth shot out from the vines. The dialogue box informed the guy that his skill has been broken. Snake walked towards the bespectacled guy. Covering his face with his hands, he asked fearfully how this was possible. Raising a cloud of dust, the yellow energy hit the guy and he screamed. Above his head, it could be seen that he had just over half of his health left. Tilly said that a person once told her that a battle mage is still a mage. Looking at the opponent with a frown, she asked if he had forgotten about the strengths and weaknesses between the different magic elements. A guy in the crowd exclaimed in surprise that the tree was vulnerable to fire, and this girl used this elemental weakness and instantly freed herself from the opponent's skill. Another guy exclaimed that her attack was smooth and clean. Tilly's dealt the guy a lot of blows with her staff. His glasses shattered, and it could be seen above his head that he had very little health left. The guy fell to the ground behind Tilly's. Frowning and gritting his teeth, he thought that he was too careless and he didn't think that she would have such a reception. He thought that he had made a fool of himself this time. As he rose to his feet, he thought that he needed to restore his honor with the next attack. The guy leapt to attack Tilly's, swinging his staff. Tilly's calmly looked back. She jumped out of the way of the guy's attack and he hit the ground. Frowning, he thought that he couldn't keep up with her speed without his glasses. A guy with white hair asked why he was spacing out. He shouted that she is above him. Tilly's used the fiery dance rising phoenix over the guy, and yellow energy shot out from 5 directions away from her, forming the silhouette of a phoenix. She hit the guy with yellow energy, and there was an explosion. The dialogue box reported that the winner had been determined and the duel was over. A person in the crowd shouted that she was really Tilly's from the arena because fire attacks are her specialty. He said that although she had withheld her information, they were too much alike. Another person admired how cool this girl was. Tilly's said it was time for the next match. She told the guys it was their turn. Ling Si said that while it was cool, it wasn't too showy for the last attack. Ruko exclaimed that it was very cool, especially the last attack. Dark Feather said, GG. Tilly said that she didn't care and now the score is 1-1 and there is only one last match left. She told them they'd better not lose it. The white-haired guy thought in fright that he didn't expect them to be such strong opponents, and they only had one match left to decide who would be the winner. A fat guy was helping a guy in red clothes leave. A man in the crowd asked if they were also imposters. Another person said that they thought they were real, but after such tricks and the level of abilities, they don't seem like they are real. He offered to watch the last match before deciding. The white-haired guy thought that he was the only one who could take part in the last match, because he couldn't just leave it to the fat guy they randomly picked up to fill the role of an archer with a firearm. Gritting his teeth, he thought that he should end this match as soon as possible and get out of here, and if he won it, they could still regain their identity. He thought that if they dragged this out any longer, everyone would only be more suspicious of them. Stepping forward, he said it was interesting, and he didn't expect them to take advantage of their teammates' carelessness and win the match. With a chuckle, he said that the score was now even, and they had the last match left. Pointing forward with his finger, he shouted to the main character that he was talking to him. Pointing his finger at him, he called him a thief who was afraid to speak all this time. He shouted for him to come here. Ling Si calmly stared back at him. A man in the crowd asked someone if he was sure. He said he was sure. Jae Run bounced up and down behind the crowd. Longface said that he heard that the popular group Shadow is fighting imposters here right now. Jae Run said he saw a video that a friend of his sent to him. A man in the crowd shouted stop pushing. Jae Run called out with a smile that the thief over there is lingering. The main character stood with his hands in his pants pockets. Xiao Lan, looking through the crowd, asked if it was really Ling Si. She exclaimed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and she wondered if he remembered her. Anti-Mainstream asked with a bitter grin how such a godlike person could remember them. Xiao Lan frowned when the white-haired guy told Ling Si that he had been following him closely, and he was the first one who wanted to leave when they challenged them. He said that the fact that they dare to pretend to be them, Shadow, when they don't even have skills, is just ridiculous. With a malicious grin, the guy told him not to worry because it's just an immediate solo, and even if he died in battle, he would immediately be reborn. He thought that if he had the skills, he wouldn't be afraid to fight them, and he was probably the weakest in their team. He decided that he would win the last match with style and not fail the mission that Workshop gave him. Ling Si and the imposter stood opposite each other. A voice announced the start of the battle. A dagger appeared in the imposter's hand, and he told the protagonist to attack him. Looking at Ling Si standing still, he exclaimed in surprise. A man in the crowd asked if the thief was too scared and why he wasn't moving. The main character stood with his eyes closed. The imposter laughed and asked if he was so scared that he couldn't move. A round object appeared in his hand and he asked if he knew how to play as a thief. Throwing the object on the ground, he shouted with a grin that he would teach it. A cloud of smoke appeared under his feet. Ryuko exclaimed in surprise that it was a smoke bomb. The battlefield was hidden in a purple cloud of smoke. Ryuko gritted his teeth and said that they wouldn't be able to see anything now, and he wanted to see Ling Si beat up this thief. A guy in the crowd said they couldn't see anything and asked which of the two was stronger. Xiao Lan covered her mouth with her hand, surrounded by smoke. The dark-haired guy said that according to his observations of this group up to this point, they've fought more than a dozen imposters, and this beastman hasn't lost a single match, and he's quite strong. He added that judging from his dagger, he probably plays as a dominant thief, so his attack stats are also high, and compared to other thieves, he has an advantage. Jae Run frowned and wondered if Ling Si could handle it. The guy with the dark hair said it was all idle talk because they couldn't see anything because of the smoke. The imposter stood with a dagger in his hands, surrounded by smoke, and used shadow substitution. Frowning, he thought that by using this 10-second smoke to confuse the opponent, he could use shadow substitution to detect the enemy's location, and then win the fight by using heavy backstab. He thought wryly that this combination had never failed him. The dialog box described shadow substitution, a thief-exclusive skill. The user's body can be further hidden in a smoky environment while being able to sense the location of the enemy in the smoke. Finding that Ling Si didn't budge, he wondered if he was a fool. He decided that he had to give it the final blow before the smoke cleared. The imposter decided to bypass it from the side. Once behind the main character, he wondered if he was still dreaming. Swinging the dagger with a vicious grin, he mentally told him to prepare for death. Ling Si instantly appeared behind the imposter, and he exclaimed in surprise. The dialog box described great eagle eyes, eyes as sharp as an eagle's. The user can detect all hidden units within a certain range. Awareness is increased for 5 seconds, giving the user a higher chance of seeing through the enemy's moves. The protagonist's eye glowed yellow, and he told the imposter that he knew where it was long before he found it. The guy exclaimed in surprise that it was a fake. Ling Si in front of him started to disappear, and his face turned into the face of an evil spirit. Xiao Lan raised an eyebrow and asked what was going on. Jae Run told her to calm down because the smoke bomb would last about 10 seconds. He looked ahead in surprise. A dialog box that appeared in front of everyone in the crowd reads, "The winner has been decided for the match you are currently spectating. End of duel." Jae Run shouted in surprise that it was fast. He asked who had won. The blonde-haired guy laughed and said it was definitely a win for them. He said that he had never lost using this combination. He continued to laugh as the smoke cleared. Ling Si asked if this was the case. The guy opened one eye. Someone shouted that the smoke was disappearing. He asked in surprise what was going on. The imposter was lying on the ground, unconscious, foaming at the mouth. In front of the blonde-haired guy, Ling Si stood with a calm face. The guy asked in surprise how it was possible that they lost. One person in the crowd asked what had happened. Another shouted about how strong he was. Ryuko shouted that the final result was them winning by a score of 2-1. The main character told them to go because there were too many people here. He said that they would go to another dungeon. Ryuko agreed. A guy in the crowd exclaimed that that guy only lasted 10 seconds. The main character's group started to leave. Ryuko smilingly told the protagonist that he really wanted to see him beat him. He asked if he had helped avenge him by giving him a good beating. Ling Si replied that he did so. Dark Feather said that he was still angry. Jae Rub offered to approach him and say hello. Xiao Lan with bright eyes agreed and said that they could ask him to help them level up again. Longface said there was no point in helping them, and they were doing well on their own. A blonde-haired guy was leaning over the unconscious guy, asking what had happened in the smoke. A man in the crowd said that they were also imposters. Another replied that they were shameless and even tried to pretend to be real and fight imposters. Another person asked if this team is now the real Shadow. He replied that it was, and they could ask them to help them pass the dungeons. The white-haired guy said that this thief is incredibly strong, and he calculated everything so much that he didn't even see his dagger. He recalled how the main character had given him many quick punches in the face. The guy said that, thus, he was badly beaten, and he could not even hit back. The fat guy said that he had heard that the battle mage from the team was Tilly's, who was famous for fighting in the arena before. He asked if they could be the real Shadow. The boys looked at him in surprise. The white-haired guy asked angrily why he had only said this now. He said that he could have saved him from disgrace. The fat guy replied that he had just found out about it. The blonde-haired guy said with a frown that it looked like they would have to inform some people about it. Xiao Lan was smiling as she hurried her companions, urging them to go meet Ling Si. Wolf's Fang headquarters, the guy turned to the vice head of the guild. A guy with dark hair pulled back asked what was wrong. The guy said that out of all the workshops they were affiliated with, they were contacted by one that has something to report. Turning around, he asked what he was talking about. The guy said it was about a strategy for how to deal with the recently popular Shadow team. He asked if he remembered. I remembered that the vice head of the guild said that this was a team that was moving up the team leaderboard. The guy said that because they were setting new records like crazy, many of their guild's records were broken. He said that if they left it at that, Team Shadow appearing out of nowhere would jeopardize their position on the team leaderboard. The vice head of the guild thought that they bribed a few workshops to pretend to be Shadow, to smear their name and put them in a bad light, and then slowly exhaust and destroy them. He thought that there were countless examples of such strategies, and there was nothing strange about it. He told the guy to continue with his report. The guy said that they reported that the battle mage in Shadow is most likely a player named Tilly's. The vice head of the guild replied that knowing her name made everything easier. He said to pass on his instructions. He ordered the thieves who specialize in assassinations to hide their guild information, target this team, and lower them back to level 0. Above the head of the vice guild leader, you can see that his name is Depraved Squirrel and he is level 15. His fingernails are painted black, he has black earrings in his ears, and bags under his eyes. Nebulous's conference room. Stillwaters said that's what they would do. He ordered the members of the first division to quickly assign the first records of several new dungeons. Coco Lai said she would pass on the order immediately. Stillwaters told her to go and asked what was wrong. He said with a smile that she looked distracted. He asked who made cheerful Vice Guildmaster Coco Lai look like this. Coco Lai frowned in embarrassment. She asked him if he had forgotten about that bet. Stillwaters, looking at the book, said with a smile that he had made a lot of big and small bets. He asked her which one she was talking about. She shouted that she was talking about the bet he made with Ling Si and told him to enter the top 10 in team leaderboard within a month. Stillwaters said he remembered. He looked at her and asked her what was wrong with him. He said it had been a few days since then. Coco Lai leaned her hands on the table and said that the name of their team was Shadow. She said that they are that 4-person team that suddenly appeared in team leaderboard, Shadow. She said she'd already confirmed it with Tiana. Coco Lai said that she followed them closely, and Shadow became quite popular, and there are a lot of posts about them on the forum. Frowning, she said that this guy was quite arrogant, and she didn't like him very much when they met, but it seems that he really has skills. Adjusting their glasses, Stillwaters asked what their score was right now. Coco Lai replied that the result of the first week has not yet been calculated, but the records they set are quite amazing. She said that she would send him the dungeon records that they had recently completed. Looking at the dialogue box, Stillwaters said he was an impressive guy. He said that it seems like his understanding of Heavenland must be incredible to achieve such results. Frowning, he said that they had subconsciously compromised the privileges of some people with important names. Coco Lai asked in surprise if he meant that some guilds would start hunting down Ling Si and his friends. Stillwaters said that a hike naturally attracts wind. She said that then they should send someone to protect them. He said they didn't need to do anything. Coco Lai raised an eyebrow in surprise and said that no matter what, he was still a member of the Nebulous Guild. She added that they couldn't miss out on a guild member with such skills. Stirring the tea with a spoon, Stillwaters said that it was precisely because it exceeded his expectations that he wanted to see how far Ling Si could go alone. He raised his cup of tea with a smile. Xiao Lan called out to the main character. Turning around, he said that he didn't expect to see them here. Xiao Lan exclaimed with glittering eyes that it must be fate. Ling Si indifferently asked if they were able to raise their level. She said that without it, the level up became very slow. Jae-Run exclaimed that, as expected, he is a member of Team Shadow. The protagonist worriedly told him not to shout so loudly. Jae-Run said that when he saw the dungeon completion records set by Shadow on the forum, he even thought that it was fake. He said that now that he knows it was his team, he's sure it's true. Ling Si told him that it wasn't as incredible as he thought, and they just used special strategies, and his teammates are very impressive. He said that without them, he couldn't have done it alone. Xiao Lan's eyes sparkled behind him. She said with a grin that, as before, he was very humble. Blushing, Xiao Lan asked him why he removed them from his friend list right after they split up. Exhaling, the main character replied that it was his fault and this is his habit. She asked if he could help them level up. She said that they've been slowly leveling up lately and there's no way they can pass the Fishman's Tide dungeon. Ling Si replied that they hadn't changed at all either. Longface said irritably that he was trying his best to find a guide for this dungeon. The main character asked if they were stuck on the last underwater battle due to lack of oxygen. Xiao Lan asked how he knew. Ling Si said that the most difficult part of the dungeon is its last one full, and they can first go to the fisherman village where there will be a hidden shop selling branchia grass. He said he would send them his location. Jae Run admiringly asked the main character if he knew everything. Longface was exasperatedly silent. The main character started giving recommendations for combat strategy, but Longface interrupted him. Gritting his teeth, he thanked him for the hints and told him that they didn't need the rest and would figure it out on their own. Xiao Lan told him that it would be much easier for them if they knew Ling Xi's strategy. Longface turned around and said that he had already helped them a lot and they couldn't force him to help them with everything. Getting angry, he called them to go and told Xiao Lan that even that clue was enough. She asked irritably why he was scolding her. She demanded that he say something. Anti-Mainstream put his hand on the main character's shoulder and said that they would meet again next time. Jae Run asked with a frustrated face about how it was rare for them to get a chance to meet Ling Si and they were leaving so quickly. Longface shouted at him to stop complaining and start walking. He said that if they were late, the hidden shop would close. The main character looked after them with a smile. Xiao Lan told him that they were leaving. She shouted at Longface to slow down. Jae Run waved and shouted to the main character that they would meet next time and he would try his best while playing as a thief. He added that Ling Si will always be the strongest. Looking after them, the protagonist thought of the words about the strongest. Frowning, he thought that this wasn't the case, and he was still far from the title of the strongest. He placed 3 silver coins on the table and thought that he was still no match for that person. He remembered Dark Lion's face. Ling Si thought that he was running out of time and needed to speed up and reach level 15 as soon as possible to become an awakened one. Waving his hand, he thought that this would be a new beginning. It was getting dark all over the stone houses, and the main character thought that this was also the only way to solve the problem with the old man's debt of 1.5 million. A week later, the Shadow Team, under the close attention of countless people, for the first time got into the top 20 in the team leaderboard. The main character and his team were standing in front of the portal. The leaderboard's top 20 has always been occupied by prominent figures from either workshops or big guilds. This has once again attracted the attention and alarm of big workshops and guilds, and even created a new wave of competition for the positions on the leaderboard. 2 weeks later, the Shadow Team took the 15th place, and this became a well-known topic for discussion. In addition, as no one stepped out to confirm Shadow's identity, it gave Shadow a sense of mystery. In an instant, the topic about whether Shadow is able to enter the team leaderboard's top 10 became a hot topic of discussion among players and on the forum. After its 3rd week, Shadow met expectations and broke into the top 10 on leaderboard. With short dungeon clear times, Shadow set new records everywhere with the experience Ling has from his previous life. The big guilds were utterly helpless against this team that appeared out of nowhere. System prompt, total score of the team, 16,058. This has ignited the flames of the players' expectations even more, and Shadow has even become the mysterious idols of some players. However, as the 4 continued to strive for the top, the hidden danger that was waiting for them finally appeared. A dagger appeared in the protagonist's hand, and he said what he told them. Putting himself in a fighting stance, he said that they had taken a share from other people, so it was unavoidable. Ruko frowned and said that it looked like it was a big guild and they came prepared. He said that they had absolutely no fighting morale. The protagonist's team was surrounded by people in white hoods. The guy said they finally found Shadow. He said to report it to the superiors and prepare for an attack. The other person took the order. Tilly's frowned and said that she was getting bored of going through the dungeons lately and was glad that she was finally able to move around. She thought that there were quite a few of them, and she would call for backup if the situation got worse. Darkfeather frowned and said GG. Ling Si thought that there were approximately 20 thieves here, most of them level 10. He whispered to his team not to waste too much time here, and they needed to finish this quickly. People in white hoods were standing around Shadow. The dark-haired guy frowned, thinking that they were dark horses that had recently appeared. He thought that they hadn't left a trace before, but they were finally able to catch them here. He thought that even their boss, Squirrel, had told them to be extra careful. A week ago, Squirrel clasped his hands behind his back and said that it looked like these 4 from Shadow were really skilled. He said that not only did they manage to avoid many of their traps, but they didn't let anything stop them from setting new records in the dungeons. Squirrel said that he also said to return them to level 0. Chuckling, he said that it looked like he had greatly underestimated them. The guy in the white hood folded his hands and apologized for the fact that they were useless. He said they would increase the scale of their traps. Squirrel replied that it wasn't related to how useless they were just stronger than them. He said that even if they did meet them, they wouldn't be able to do anything to them. The boy looked at him. Squirrel told him if they found them, stall for time as long as possible. He said he would like to meet them in person. The guy thought that since Squirrel has already put it that way, they should just stall for time. He shouted for everyone to split up into teams of 5 and 1 team each. He told them to stall for as long as they could. The white-hooded men jumped in to attack the protagonist's team. The guy gave the order to attack. Lang Si said that they would fight separately. Ruko agreed. The assassins fired the crossbows on their sleeves. Ruko covered himself with the shield, and the arrows flew off the shield. Ruko, wrapped in yellow energy, shouted that it was useless. The guy in the white hood stared in surprise at the huge fur-covered fist approaching him. Ruko's punch sent the boy flying to the side. He slammed his huge hand on the ground, knocking the opponents away. The guy in the white hood asked in surprise how it got bigger. Ruko with a smirk told them to taste the pure power. Ruko behind Tilly's lifted the thief he was holding in his hand into the air. Tilly struck the ground with her staff. Yellow energy appeared under the staff. She used Flaming Snake's dragon lock, and the opponents were surrounded by flames in the shape of a snake. The guy in the white hood shouted that it was a fiery crowd control skill. Tilly said that should be enough to deal with them. Frowning, she told me to play with her for a while. The shot went through the leg of a running guy in a white hood. System prompt: cripple, a certain part of the body has been subjected to a destructive attack, causing the temporary loss of that part's ability to move. The beast-eared guy shouted to the guy who was wincing in pain, telling him not to let the distance between them grow, because it would be an advantage for his firearm. Dark Feather fired his sniper rifle. The guy with the animal ears exclaimed in surprise. The shots hit everyone standing around him in the head. Dark Feather said that the rest is just him. The boy looked in his direction, startled. The shot hit him in the head. Dark Feather said, "GG." The guy shouted to the team leader that these people were much more difficult than they expected, and their methods of fighting were too unfamiliar. He screamed in pain. Their team leader gritted his teeth as he thought that these 4 from Shadow were much stronger than they thought, and they were no match for them at all. He thought that if he had known, he wouldn't have accepted this mission. He thought that all the strong thieves in the guild didn't want to accept this thankless task. He wondered if he was too inexperienced. He thought that these thieves most likely knew from the very beginning that Shadow was very strong, and so gave up on the quest. Ruko was grinning and Tilly's was standing there with a serious expression on her face. The guy thought that these people had hidden their real equipment and levels, and they were really unfathomable, especially this thief. Dark Feather stared ahead, frowning. Lang Si ran forward, swinging his dagger. The guy thought that he managed to crush 4 of their guys in just a few moves, and he couldn't even see what techniques he was using. Gritting his teeth in fright, he thought that if he hadn't taken the opportunity to quickly escape, he would have been finished. The voice from behind said a little that he was wondering why he was missing one person. Lang Si behind him said with a smirk that hiding was not nice of him. The boy gave a startled cry. Swinging the dagger, the protagonist told him to keep his team company underground. The boy squeezed his eyes shut as the dagger approached him. The black-bladed dagger stopped the protagonist's dagger. Squirrel told the main character, who was looking at him in surprise, that it was cruel. The main character thought that he was very fast, and even he didn't notice when he appeared here. Squirrel asked if they were Shadow. The guy behind him said he was finally here. Dark Feather fired his revolver. In Squirrel's other hand, another dagger appeared. The main character was surprised to see that he was fighting with 2 daggers. Squirrel blocked the shot with a dagger and asked why they were so impatient. Dark Feather stood with his 2 revolvers held out in front of him. Lang Si asked Squirrel if it was true that he was Depraved Squirrel, Vice Guildmaster of the Wolffang Guild. Ruko repeated the words about Vice Guildmaster with a frown. Frowning, Lang Si said that judging from the fact that he can dual wield, he has successfully awakened. Squirrel said he was pretty experienced. He said that he was truly an awakened one. Wrapped in blue electricity, he asked with a smirk if he had fought the awakened one before. Squirrel looked at the main character with a smirk. Tilly's asked in surprise that he was an awakened one. Dark Feather stared at him intently in silence. Ruko exclaimed with a smirk that he didn't care if he was awakened or not. He said he was the enemy. Rushing forward, shield in hand, he asked what was the point of listening to his ramblings. Ruko said he would go first. Lang Si ran after him with his hand out and shouted at him to take your time, because this guy is not an ordinary opponent. Ruko increased by saying that he knows and it's just a job change. He told the protagonist that they had already reached the 15th level, and if they worked together, they wouldn't lose. The main character is gritting his teeth. I wondered if he still knew what awakened meant. He thought that they were on a completely different level from normal players, especially since they still hadn't changed their professions. Lang Si ran forward and shouted that he would go after Ruko. He told Tilly's and Dark Feather that he would count on their support. Dark Feather agreed and said that it looks like Ruko doesn't really know. Tilly's agreed. The main character thought hard that although Squirrel wasn't as strong as Dynamic Darkness, he was one of the top 10 thieves in his previous life. He thought that they should escape from this battle as soon as possible, and as long as they were still red-listed, they couldn't deal with him. Ruko swung a huge fist and said that they should meet stronger players to become stronger, and these guys were not even worth mentioning. Squirrel stood still and unperturbed as the fist approached him. Ruko used Mountain Cleave, kicking up a cloud of dust with a strong blow to the ground. Ling Si shouted to him that they were red-listed and they should retreat as soon as possible. Squirrel, who dodged Ruko's attack, said that the saying all brawl and no brain was created specifically for people like him. He leaped up past Ruko, swinging his dagger. The main character looked at what was happening in surprise. Squirrel used Tiger Subduing Dragon Clamp Act 1, approaching the main character, and swung his dagger. The dialogue box described Tiger Subduing Dragon Clamp Act 1, an awakened skill. When faced with many attackers, this skill can effectively counterattack. The extent of the counterattack is based on the number of attackers. Ruko, wrapped in blue energy, gritted his teeth and thought that he was too fast and even faster than Ling Si. The dialogue box says, "You have been restricted. You are now unable to move before the opponent makes a move." Squirrel said that those who kill in Overworld will definitely be red-listed, and the red-listed status of Ling Si is rather glaring. The main character looked in surprise at the approaching Squirrel. Squirrel asked what he thought of killing him and stripping him of his gear. The main character thought that he could kill him before he used any skill, and this is the gap between awakened players and normal players. He frowned. Squirrel said that he heard that he is the strongest in Shadow, but in reality, he is just a thief who can't even hold his dagger tightly. Tilly's used Flame Dance Flight of the Phoenix, and a stream of fire in the shape of a bird headed towards Squirrel. Squirrel dodged and used Tiger Subduing Dragon Clamp Act 2. Ruko gritted his teeth and found an explosion above his head. Tilly's, surrounded by flames, looked ahead with a frown. Squirrel, jumping to the side, noted that a female battle mage is a rarity. He saw a bullet coming toward his face. The shot hit him in the head. Dark Feather stood amidst the scattering dust with a sniper rifle in his hands. Looking through the scope, he said GG. Ruko praised him with a smirk. Ling Si turned around tensely. He shouted to Dark Feather about being behind them. Squirrel, wrapped in blue electricity, stood behind Dark Feather. Dark Feather thought it was a clone. The blue energy in the shape of a squirrel was disappearing on the tree branch. Squirrel said with a grin that shooters with firearms are also rare. He said that he would be useless in a short-range battle. Turning around, Dark Feather noticed that he was very close and thought about how terrifying his speed was. Squirrel held a dagger to his throat and said that he hated characters who attacked from the dark like him the most. The main character jumped in their direction. Kicking Squirrel, he shouted for Dark Feather to run. Squirrel, with an evil grin, asked the main character if he was trying to be a hero. He said that in that case, he would die first. Ling Si noticed the approaching dagger. Gritting his teeth, he ducked and dodged the blow. Squirrel was surprised to notice that it was top time. He kicked him in the stomach. Ling Si and Squirrel were facing each other in battle stances. Squirrel, touching the cut on his cheek with his finger, thought that it wasn't surprising that he could bulldoze ordinary players. A round purple object appeared in the protagonist's hand, and he suggested splitting up and retreating. A purple cloud of smoke enveloped them. Squirrel, looking up into a cloud of smoke, said they had escaped. A voice called out to him. Squirrel, noticing the people in white hoods, asked them that they were reborn. The guy told him that they ran away from the graveyard right after they were reborn. Another guy asked where they were. Squirrel replied that they had escaped and there was no need to pursue them. He said to let them escape because they are ordinary players who haven't even changed their profession. He said that he thought they were some high-level awakened players. Nebula's 3rd Division Captain Meeting Room. Tiana, noticing the message from Ling Si, thought it was rare. On the dialogue box, there was a message from the main character asking Tiana to help him tell the guild head that he had done what he asked. Shadow could have tried to take the first place, but there were unforeseen circumstances, so they will stop there because all the members of the Shadow team have more important things to do right now. The main character wrote that this is a change of profession. Tiana's mouth dropped open. Frowning, Ling Si stood near the tree, looking at the dialogue box and thinking about the awakened ones. Gritting his teeth, he mentally told Squirrel to wait for him. The sun shone on the roofs of buildings in a dark city alley. The old man told Ling Si that he still had a good appetite today. He said it was good because he was still growing and he needed to eat more to be stronger. Ling Si, putting the chopsticks in his mouth, said that it was because it wasn't an exaggeration to say that what he was going to do would determine his entire future, so he wanted to be in the best shape possible. He frowned as he held a bowl of rice in his hand. The old man asked what the important matter was and if there was anything he could do to help him. The main character replied that there was no need and everything was fine. Smiling, he said that it was something he should do on his own. Entering the game, the main character thought that the most important moment in his life had finally arrived, and today the change of profession would begin. He frowned. Ling Si raised an eyebrow in surprise. Seeing the crowd of people in front of him, he thought in frustration that it looked like he had underestimated the level-up speed of players in Heavenland. Job change lobby. The main character found himself in a brightly lit building with stained glass windows. He thought that so many people had already come to get their job change assignment. A person in the crowd said that he hoped that everything would go smoothly so that he could get an easy mission and successfully change professions to successfully become an awakened one. Another person asked in surprise that there are different levels of difficulty for the job change task. The guy with the elf ears said that he had heard about it from a friend who had already completed it. He said that each profession has 3 missions of varying difficulty, A, B, and C, and the goals and requirements of each mission are different. He added that, in order to ensure fairness, the goal of each mission will adjust to the player's attributes and characteristics to prevent players from preparing for the task in advance. The main character listened to their conversation in silence. Closing his eyes, he thought that now that he thought about it, he still remembered the feeling of despair from his previous life. He thought about how in his previous life, even though he was able to complete the profession change mission, he was unable to awaken because after the profession change task, his chance of awakening was 12%. Lingxi recalled how he was standing in a crowd of people in the rain with a gloomy face. He thought that overall performance is only a small fraction of what determines a player's chance of awakening, and it still depends heavily on the level of completing the profession change task. The main character thought that in his previous life, he had encountered difficulties during the task of changing professions, which made his chance of awakening extremely low. Lingxi raised one eyebrow. He wondered if this was all arranged by fate, or if fate was just playing with him. He thought that in his previous life, he had gotten the Thief C mission, where he had to fight a version of himself with doubled stats. He remembered standing in front of his clone appearing in front of him. The main character thought that Lingxi, who was created by artificial intelligence, not only knew all his data, but also knew exactly his attack and defense rates, and even though there was such a big advantage over him, his copy also had twice the characteristics. He recalled his battle with his copy. Lingxi thought that even though he had persevered until the time was up and barely completed the task, the chance of awakening was extremely small, and with an extremely low chance of awakening of 12%, he was unable to awaken. He thought that he had heard that other players who received Quest C only needed to fight the dungeon boss, and the boss attributes were changed to match the player's attributes. After that, he went to the forum to ask about it, but no one got a task where they had to fight themselves, and his luck in the past life was just terrible. The main character thought that in this life such a task should not appear, if only because its characteristics are completely different. He thought that no matter what task he received this time, he had absolute confidence that he would be able to pass it. He decided that he should get an excellent chance of awakening and becoming an awakened one. Frowning, he thought that he wouldn't allow any failure in this life. The blonde-haired girl standing next to the chair said with a smile that she was worried. The guy downstairs told her that she could handle it and everything would go well. The girl sat down on a chair. The chair's wooden arms wrapped around the surprised girl. On the back of the chair was an old man's face that greeted the human archer. The chair closed its eyes, thought for a moment, and said it understood. Glancing at the girl, he said that she was an archer who was good at position herself, and according to her stats and performance in the past, as expected, Mission B was most suitable for her. The chair let go of the girl who was sitting surrounded by red squares. The guy shouted that she could handle it, and he would wait for her outside. He said she should be able to handle it. After a burp, the chair called the next one. Lingxi thought that every time he sees this scene, it seems strange to him. The main character went up to the hill. He sat down on a chair, and the chair wrapped its arms around him. The chair, saying that it was a human thief, thought about it. He said that he was a great all-rounder, and according to his stats and performance in the past, as expected, he was best suited to task. Lingxi smiled nervously and thought that he got Mission A, which is to explore the map. He thought that he was incredibly lucky, and he is confident that he can get a great result and even a better record. A golden insignia appeared on his clothes. Noticing this, the chair exclaimed, "Wait." The main character turned his head in surprise. The chair said that this is the first time he has encountered such a situation, and it is very strange. Lingxi asked what was wrong. The chair frowned and said that he had the same aura as them. The main character started to disappear and wondered what that meant. He was surprised to think that he had never heard of anything like this before. He asked me what was going on. The chair said, "Task." As the main character began to fall through the multicolored space. The chair was empty again, and the guy asked if he had imagined it and why it was colored. He asked if all portals were white. He worriedly asked what had just happened and why the Stone Throne had announced 2 different missions. He asked what it was at the end and does this game have an S task. He asked if time shouldn't be just A, B, or C. Another person said that he probably heard it wrong, and this is Mission A, and Mission S does not exist. It was raining. Raindrops hit the wet pavement. The main character was walking down a city street in the rain. A dialogue box greeted him on the job change task for thieves. Ling Si stood with his hands in his pants pockets. Looking up, he thought of this place. The dialogue box says that he was given task as the main character, swearing at fate, wondered if she was deliberately making things difficult for him and why she was making fun of him so much. Several copies of Ling Si appeared in the rain, and he wondered if she wanted to plunge him into despair in this life as well. There were 3 copies of Ling Si in front of the protagonist, and he was surprised to think that there were 3 of them this time. The dialogue box says, Mission objective, defeat your mirror selves. Mission description, the mirror selves attributes are double of yours. Defeat them. Mission time, unlimited. In a previous life, Ling Si. It was raining over the city. The main character is standing in an alley, breathing heavily. Gritting his teeth, he wondered why such a mission existed. He thought that he had found out so much about it, but he had never heard of such a mission. Frowning, the protagonist thought that he couldn't fail it, and if he wanted to change his life, he had to become an awakened one. Looking up tensely, he thought that he couldn't fail it. Peeking around the corner, he thought that his copy's attributes were twice as high as him, and he couldn't fight it directly. He decided to keep circling it and stall for time until it was over. A copy of Ling Si appeared behind him. It leaped at him, swinging its dagger. The replica hit the ground hard. The main character, falling to the ground, looked at his copy in fright. The copy stood with a dagger in his hand in a combat stance. With a startled frown, Ling Si thought this was crazy. The protagonist in the present tense frowned as he thought about why he had to remember his shameful past right now. He told himself not to get stuck in his head and calm down. He thought that this life was different. The main character was standing in front of his 3 spears. The dialogue box says there are 10 seconds left before the mission starts. Each of the participants is prohibited from using skills during the mission. The main character, crouching down, thought that in the previous life it was a battle of foundation techniques, and this time the task has no time limit, and the strategy with delaying time will not work. After jumping up, Ling Si thought that he would leave this place first to avoid the 3 of them attacking him later. Looking at his faceless copies, he thought that he needed to think things through well. He had plenty of time to think, and he needed to calm down. The Ling Si replica's eye glowed red. The dialogue box says that the job change task has started. It wished me luck. Copies of the main character instantly took off. Ling Si, looking at them from the window, thought that there were 3 copies against him this time, and they would surely split up to quickly find him. Frowning, he thought that this meant that once they found him, he had a short period of time in which to fight them one-on-one, and if the fight dragged on until the other 2 arrived, he would definitely die, and he couldn't relax. He thought that as soon as a player dies during a profession change task, it ends. The main character thought that 3 of his copies had doubled his stats, and he was trying to raise his stats as much as possible in this life. He thought he could safely say that, within the same rank, as long as they're a thief, he wouldn't lose to anyone. He thought that whether it was attacking, defending, or even habitual actions, such copies could be called flawless. The main character thought about what to do. Looking out the window, he thought that if he wanted to increase his chance of awakening, he should get as high a completion rate as possible. He thought about how he could increase his completion rate. He tensed as a copy of himself with a glowing red eye appeared behind him. A copy of Ling Si pulled the main character out of the window by grabbing his arm, breaking the glass. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought that they had attacked him from outside. The main character swung his leg in front of his copy. With 2 jumps, he climbed to the roof of the building, and the replica jumped after him. Gritting his teeth in fright, the protagonist blocked the attack of his copy. Ling Si jumped to the side, and his copy jumped onto the roof, standing in front of him. Frowning, he thought that if he had thought for a moment longer than just now, he probably would have been stabbed in the heart by now. He thought that their speed was terrifying, and his doubled attributes were terrifying. The main character ordered himself to calm down, because this is him. The copy of Ling Si was looking at him with its head tilted with a glowing red eye. Ling Si ordered himself to think about what he would do. His copy interrupted his thoughts, charging in with glowing red eyes. The copy hit him with an elbow, and Ling Si dodged, jumping to the edge of the building. Gritting his teeth, he thought that he was too fast and attacked him before he could even finish his thought. The main character thought that the fact that he can't use his skills is already putting him at great disadvantage, and using only foundation techniques to defeat his copies that have doubled his stats, he has no chance. The copy leapt towards Ling Si, swinging its dagger. The main character thought it was really unreasonable. Falling from the roof, the main character hit the ground hard, raising a cloud of dust. He stands in the clearing cloud of dust, covered in wounds. Frowning, he thought that he didn't have a second to rest. The copy of Ling Si rushed towards the main character. The copy struck several times with the dagger. A dialogue box informed the main character that he was affected with defense break. Ling Si was running away from his copy that was chasing after him, jumping away from buildings. The replica was right behind him with glowing red evil eyes. Ling Si thought about what he should do. Gritting his teeth, he thought that he couldn't find a single weakness. He was thrown back by the impact and wondered if this life of his would be the same as his last. Frowning, he fell down with blood coming out of his mouth. He thought that things might be even more hopeless in this life. There were 3 copies of him in front of him, and they jumped in after him. Ling Si asked in his mind how much longer fate would mock him. Closing his eyes, he thought that this mission was impossible and he could forget about it. He decided to let it all end. Opening his eyes, he remembered something. A dagger appeared in his hand and he thought he understood now. Putting himself into a fighting stance, Ling Si thought that there was still hope. Ling Si grabbed one of his copies by the wrist and blocked the other's attack with his dagger. The 3rd copy of Ling Si was watching from the rooftop. The copy noticed something in surprise. The main character was standing between 2 copies of himself. Frowning, he said that, as he thought, this was the solution. Ling Si jumped up. The copy charged, swinging its dagger. The copy slashed out with the dagger, and Ling Si dodged, swerving back. He and his copy landed on the ground. The main character was standing in front of his 3. He said he needed to thank him for that rooftop attack because it gave him the clue he needed. Recalling the copy's punch, he said that his dagger hits twice as fast as his, however, he managed to block it before he could think. He said with a grin that this was the solution. Pointing a finger at his head, he said that he should act before he thinks. The main character said that even though their attributes are twice as large as his, in the end they are just numbers, and even if they can predict his habitual action using data, they can't know something that he hasn't realized yet. Frowning, Ling Si said that these were his conditioned reflexes. Holding out his dagger, he said that they were also called top time. As he pushed off from the ground, he thought that he needed to trust his senses and trust in his reflexes from the signals that his body receives. Rushing forward to attack towards the he thought that the anxiety he had just felt as a result of fear was the real reason why he had failed in his previous life. He thought top time was a talent exclusive to them, the people. Standing between his 3 spears, he stabbed with the dagger and thought how could he forget about it because of the nervousness caused by the memories of the past. The main character thought about what he should be afraid of in this life. Grinning, he said, their strength is really impressive. After kicking the copy, he said that even though their stats were twice as big, some things still didn't change. Once behind the back of his copy, he said it was hit recovery time after they were attacked. System prompt, hit recovery, certain types of attacks, such as inflicting a status ailment on an opponent, will render said opponent unable to act for a short period of time. The higher the stagger resistance, the shorter the duration. This does not affect the time taken to cast skills, receive blows, fall, get up from the ground, and so on. After stabbing the copy in the back, Ling Si said with a serious face that even if the attributes were 100 times greater than his, this fixed mechanic couldn't be changed. Frowning, he said that none of them had a chance of beating him. He swung the dagger, and the purple silhouette of his replica disappeared into thin air. Grinning, he asked the remaining spears if they wanted to fight him alone or together. After blocking the attacks of 2 from both sides, the protagonist thought they were fast, but that's nothing compared to top time. Tossing the copies aside, he thought he could feel it. Ling Si thought that top time is divided into 3 levels: beginner, honed, and instinctive. As he dodged the dagger wielding, he thought that when a person who had mastered top time fought another person who hadn't mastered it, it was comparable to a trained martial artist fighting an ordinary person. He thought that his top time had finally reached the level of honed. Frowning, he thought that, as long as they were unable to simulate a state like top time, they wouldn't be able to do anything against it, no matter how fast they were. The main character appeared next to the copy. Frowning, he thought, now. He hit his copy, and the impact sent it flying into the air. Glancing at the 3rd copy, he said with a threatening face that there was only 1 copy left. Grinning, Ling Si said that it looked like the roles of hunter and prey had finally been reversed in this life. Stillwaters asked about the change of profession. Tiana answered in the affirmative and said that it looked like Ling Si had her own plans. Holding a red folder of papers in her hands, she said that he had already fulfilled his requirement to enter the top 10 in team leaderboard. Stillwaters said that he knows about it, and it would be hard for him not to know about it, given how famous Team Shadow has become lately. Coco Lai said with a smile that a change of profession is a good thing. She said that when Ling Si was advancing on the team leaderboard, countless players raised their level just for the sake of getting a profession change as soon as possible and becoming an awakened one. She said that given how unyielding and headstrong Ling Si is, she's sure he won't be happy to be left behind. Coco Lai said that some time ago, other guilds also organized several waves of massive profession change teams, and there should be quite a lot of awakened ones right now. Tiana agreed, and said that she had heard that the influence of the awakened in real life was becoming more apparent. She said that she was sure that Ling Si was in a hurry to become an awakened one as soon as possible. Stillwaters said that since he was a professional player, there shouldn't be any problems. He told Tiana to come see him when he got back after waking up. Tiana bowed and obeyed. She thought with an uncertain smile that if it was Ling Si, then he would be fine. Lightning flashed in the sky, and the protagonist loudly asked why. The dialogue box congratulates you on completing the task of changing your profession. Ling Si, gritting his teeth and looking at the dialogue box, asked what was going on and what went wrong. The dialogue box says, you'll be awarded with an all-new job system for the thief class. More exciting ways to play await your discovery. The main character is standing in the rain, looking at the dialogue box. The purple silhouette of his replica lying on the ground was disappearing. Clenching his hand into a fist, the main character thought that he had done everything he could, and everything should not be like this. Gritting his teeth furiously, he asked why everything was still like this. The dialogue box says, after evaluation, your awakening rate for the S mission is determined to be 12%. Unfortunately, you have failed to become an awakened. The dialogue box says, awakening rate 12%. Result of awakening, failure. There are 2 buttons on the dialogue box, exit and next. Standing in the rain, Ling Si asked what went wrong. Standing on the wet asphalt, he stared at the dialogue box with a grim face. He asked why his chance of awakening was still 12%. He said that this cannot happen, and it cannot be equal to 12%. Falling to his knees, he prayed that this was his past life again from the beginning. With a bitter frown and gritted teeth, he asked what he should do. To be awakened is to be a person who is able to receive special streams from the game device, which activates special areas of the brain. This allows a person to use the skills they have learned in the game in real life. The state-developed game Heavenland was created with the goal of awakening a person's hidden potential for unknown reasons. Those who successfully awoke, especially those with a high chance of awakening, achieved incredible achievements in many areas and as a result became even stronger in the real world. In this way, strong awakened ones receive special treatment from the state and become specially designated warriors of the country, receiving an official state post. Even the lower-class citizens of the slums have the opportunity to reach the top in one night and change their lives forever. In this era, the status of an awakened is the decisive status of one standing. The main character remembered Huigu's face. The main character thought that he, having failed to awaken in his previous life, had become a member of the lower caste along with the rest of the vast majority. Because of his orphan status, whether in a game or in real life, he was always bullied and looked down on. A life in which he could barely survive, desperately accepting small part-time jobs, a life in which he had no dignity or honor, and a life in which he was treated like trash with no sense of presence and no hope. Ling Si squeezed his eyes shut in sadness. For him, the past life was painted gray. He didn't want to go through that again, he thought. Opening his empty eyes, he wondered if he would have to live this life like trash as well. Ling Si was surprised to notice something on the dialogue box. He asked what the 2 options were. The dialogue box had 2 buttons, exit and next. Looking at the dialogue box, I thought that he was too upset by the failure alerts and didn't even notice them. The main character thought that after completing the profession change mission, only the exit button is available, which sends the player back to the lobby. He thought that he had never heard of the next button. He thought that there shouldn't be such a button here. Frowning, he wondered if he should choose between these 2 options. He wondered if it was possible that there was a right and wrong choice. Ling Si thought about what the next button does. The protagonist with a grim face thought that this profession change quest was very unusual and he had never heard of an S-rank quest. He thought that even his contents were very strange. Ling Si thought that even though he hadn't been able to awaken, at least the change of profession was a success. He wondered intensely if choosing the next button would affect his career change, if it would only make things worse. He thought that if he also failed his profession change mission because of her, then he would have to wait another month before he could accept a new profession change mission. Holding his finger over the buttons, he considered what to choose. Ling Si decided to choose the safe path because it would be one disaster after another if it affected the job change assignment. The main character remembered being hung by his feet from a tree. Ling Si looked at himself from his previous life, hanging upside down from a tree and surrounded by 3 people. Looking at his battered face, he thought that he would never back down. He remembered with a grim face that he would never back down in this lifetime. He looked resolutely ahead, frowning. The main character swore at the exit button, hitting the button on the dialogue box. The dialogue box indicated that he had chosen to go to the second phase of the job change task. The following dialogue box says, the second phase will start soon. Your results from the first phase have been saved. The main character asked in surprise why there is a second phase in the task of changing a profession, and what it means that his results were saved. The dialogue box reported that his final score will be determined when he exits the job change task. The following dialogue box says, please keep in mind, the chances of waking up from different phases can be added up. Ling Si asked in surprise about the fact that the chances of waking up could be stacked. Frowning, he asked if he had heard correctly. The dialogue box asked you to prepare and said that the second phase will start soon. Ling Si shouted that his final chance of awakening wouldn't be 12%, and he still had a chance of becoming an awakened one. The dialogue box says, Phase 2 mission objective: defeat your mirror selves. Number of enemies, 6. Mission description: the mirror selves' attributes are double of yours. Neither party is allowed to use skills. Defeat them. Mission time, unlimited. The main character shouted that it doesn't matter what happens in the second phase, he is ready for it. The dialogue box indicated that the second phase would start in 10 seconds. Ling Si thought that 6 copies is twice as much. The dialogue box says, upon the completion of the second phase, your acquired awakening rate may be stacked with the awakening rate from the first phase. Ling Si, grinning, thought that was all he needed to hear, and he will fight with as many copies as they want. A dagger appeared in his hand, and he thought that he wanted to see what he could achieve in this life. The dialogue box announced the start of the countdown and wished you good luck. Coco Lai frowned and asked about the fact that Ling Si still hadn't come out. Tiana said that his status still says unable to contact. She assumed it meant that he was still on a career change assignment. Coco Lai, sitting cross-legged on the red sofa, asked him what he was up to and if it had already been more than half a day. She said that based on his abilities, the job change task shouldn't take him that long. She asked if he could have gone out on a date and then deliberately put a do not disturb status. Cocking an eyebrow, Coco Lai said that it only took her in Stillwater's half an hour to complete the job change task. She asked him why it took him more than half a day. Tiana said that he wasn't that kind of person, and he most likely ran into a problem. Tiana recalled Ruko telling her that he had completed his profession change assignment, successfully awakened with an 83% chance of awakening. He was telling her that he had an interesting mission and it was to measure his damage potential in a limited amount of time. He said that he immediately transformed and dealt damage without thinking, and it was the first time he had dealt damage in such a pleasant way. Tiana thought with a sad face that she remembered that Ruko went on his profession change assignment around the same time as Ling Si, but came out less than an hour later. Coco Lai said that she heard that Shadow was recently ambushed by a thief from Wolf's Fang near the forest area. She said that their attack was personally led by their guild's vice head, Squirrel, who seems to have successfully changed professions. Frowning, Coco Lai said that Squirrel attacked Shadow, but Ling Si didn't report it. She said that Stillwaters believes that the enemy doesn't know that Shadow is part of the Nebulous Guild, otherwise they wouldn't have acted so recklessly. Tiana jumped up from the table and shouted that this was the first time she had ever heard of this, and Ling Si hadn't told her anything about it. She said it wasn't surprising then that he told her that their entire team was going to go on a career change mission. With a frown, Tiana thought that he was proud and probably didn't want to let it go for nothing. Coco Lai said that Wolf's Fang has been acting presumptuous lately, and they've been picking fights with teams from their guild very often, and their heads turn a blind eye to the behavior of their guild members. She said that they are biding their time and they need to deal with this sooner or later. However, Nebulous is ready to fight them at any time. Tiana thought that if the skirmishes between Nebulous and Wolf's Fang escalated, a full-fledged war would be inevitable. Frowning, she thought that she hoped Ling Si would do well. She thought that she was looking forward to Shadow's growth. The main character fights with his copies. 3 copies with the eye-glowing red stand in a combat stance. Ling Si stands in front of them with a dagger in his hand, surrounded by a scattering cloud of dust.